Today we are going to look at these Karens got mauled by deadly animals, from a social media influencer who sabotaged her safety equipment to a fitness enthusiast who believed she could outrun deadly predators. It was July 15, 2016, when the Lawson family arrived at the remote Sundarbans National Park in West Bengal, India. The vast mangrove delta stretched endlessly before them, a maze of tidal channels and dense vegetation where the Ganges River meets the Bay of Bengal. Ancient mangrove trees rose from the brackish water, their aerial roots creating an impenetrable network. This UNESCO World Heritage Site harbored one of the world's most dangerous ecosystems, where saltwater crocodiles lurked beneath the surface and venomous snakes coiled in the canopy above. Genevieve Lawson, a 42-year-old real estate agent from London, had insisted on booking the most expensive boat tour package available. Known for her demanding personality and unwillingness to accept limitations, she had already berated their local guide Ravi multiple times during the morning briefing. Her husband, David, a 45-year-old investment banker, tried unsuccessfully to moderate her increasingly aggressive behavior. Their teenage children, Emma and Jake, watched uncomfortably as their mother dismissed every safety warning as unnecessary fear-mongering designed to limit their premium experience. Ravi, despite his 15 years of guiding experience in these treacherous waters, found himself intimidated by Genevieve's constant threats of negative reviews and demands for closer wildlife encounters. The motorboat had been equipped with safety barriers specifically to keep tourists safe from the apex predators that ruled this ancient domain. But Genevieve viewed these precautions as obstacles preventing her from capturing the authentic jungle photographs she demanded. The Sundarbans mangroves serve as the exclusive hunting ground for the world's largest population of Bengal tigers, apex predators that have adapted uniquely to this aquatic environment. Unlike their mainland cousins, these tigers are exceptional swimmers and have developed an unusual willingness to hunt humans in water. Weighing up to 400 pounds and measuring over 10 feet in length, these magnificent cats possess 4-inch canine teeth capable of crushing windpipes and delivering fatal wounds within seconds. Their distinctive orange coat with black stripes provides perfect camouflage among the dappled shadows of the mangrove forest, making them virtually invisible as they move silently through the water. During the afternoon tour, their boat approached a narrow channel where Ravi spotted fresh tiger tracks along the muddy shoreline. He immediately cut the engine and whispered for complete silence, explaining that a large male tiger had recently passed through the area. Despite his urgent warnings about remaining in the boat, Genevieve became frustrated with the distance and declared she needed closer photographs. Against all protests from her family and guide, Genevieve stepped over the safety barrier and lowered herself into the chest-deep channel water. The murky tidal water concealed her movements as she waded toward the mangrove shoreline, camera held high above her head. Unknown to the group, a massive 400-pound male Bengal tiger had been resting in the dense vegetation upstream and had detected their boat's engine minutes earlier. Sundarbans tigers are ambush predators that use water as their primary hunting medium, approaching prey with complete silence while swimming. This particular male had successfully killed humans before and recognized the splashing sounds of vulnerable prey entering his territory. The tiger slipped into the water upstream and began swimming toward Genevieve with only its eyes and nose visible above the surface. When Genevieve reached the muddy shoreline and began photographing tiger tracks, she remained completely unaware of the approaching predator. The tiger closed the final 20 feet underwater, using its powerful limbs to propel itself through the murky channel with deadly precision. The attack erupted from the water with explosive violence. The massive tiger surfaced directly behind Genevieve and immediately clamped its powerful jaws around her throat from behind. The 4-inch canine teeth punctured through her neck muscles and crushed her windpipe with over 1,000 pounds of bite force. The tiger's signature killing technique involves suffocating prey by crushing the throat, and the massive pressure collapsed her airway instantly. Genevieve's body went rigid as the tiger's teeth severed major blood vessels in her neck, causing massive internal bleeding. The predator's powerful forelimbs wrapped around her torso, while its hind legs found purchase on her lower body, holding her in an inescapable grip. The tiger then began its drowning technique, pulling her backward into deeper water while maintaining its crushing bite on her throat. The combination of crushed windpipe, severed arteries, and forced submersion proved fatal within 2 minutes. Genevieve's struggles ceased as blood loss and oxygen deprivation caused her to lose consciousness. The tiger continued holding her underwater for several more minutes before releasing the body and disappearing into the mangrove maze. It was March 22nd, 2017, when Tara Whitfield arrived at the Neptune Islands off the coast of South Australia, one of the world's premier great white shark diving destinations. The remote rocky outcrops jutted from the Southern Ocean, surrounded by crystal-clear waters that plunged to depths of over 200 feet. These nutrient-rich waters served as a natural highway for migrating great whites, drawing the massive predators to hunt the abundant seal colonies. Tara Whitfield, a 38-year-old marine biology graduate student from Los Angeles, had booked the most expensive shark cage diving package available and immediately began making unreasonable demands. Known for her entitled attitude and belief that money could buy her anything, she had already berated Captain Steve Morrison and marine biologist Dr. Lisa Chen multiple times during the morning briefing. Her boyfriend, Brad Mitchell, watched uncomfortably as Tara screamed at the crew for what she called their pathetic safety restrictions. Captain Morrison, with 18 years of experience operating in these dangerous waters, had dealt with difficult clients before, but Tara's aggressive behavior and complete lack of empathy alarmed him. She repeatedly demanded that the protective cage be removed entirely, claiming she had paid premium prices and deserved unrestricted access to the sharks. When Dr. Lisa Chen attempted to explain the life-threatening dangers, Tara dismissed her as an incompetent employee who was clearly jealous of successful people. Tara had convinced herself that her graduate student status and expensive booking fee entitled her to special treatment. She threatened to destroy the company's reputation online and file lawsuits if the crew didn't provide her with the extreme experience she demanded. Her complete disregard for safety became evident when she suggested that crew members should enter the water first to test whether the sharks were dangerous. The waters around Neptune Islands hosted some of the largest great white sharks on Earth, apex predators that had ruled these seas for over 400 million years. These magnificent hunters can reach lengths of over 20 feet and weights exceeding 4,000 pounds, with massive triangular heads housing rows of razor-sharp serrated teeth. Each tooth measures up to 3 inches in length and is designed to slice through flesh and bone with devastating efficiency. Great whites possess the most powerful bite force of any living creature, capable of exerting over 4,000 pounds per square inch of crushing pressure. The crew had successfully attracted multiple great white sharks using a carefully prepared chum mixture. Among the responding predators was a massive 18-foot female, estimated to weigh over 4,000 pounds, that had been feeding aggressively on the bait. The enormous shark displayed classic hunting behaviors, circling the boat with calculated precision while investigating the steel diving cage. Before entering the water, Tara secretly loosened the connections on her diving regulator, planning to create a fake equipment malfunction that would justify exiting the protective cage. She believed she was clever enough to manipulate the situation to get the unrestricted shark access she felt entitled to. Once submerged in the protective cage, Tara immediately began signaling fake distress to the surface crew, pointing frantically at her sabotaged regulator. Captain Morrison initiated emergency procedures to bring her to the surface, but instead of ascending, Tara swam away from the cage toward the feeding sharks, believing her superior intelligence made her invulnerable. Her erratic swimming movements created the exact type of distressed prey behavior that triggers great white hunting instincts. The massive female great white detected Tara's panicked swimming immediately and abandoned the chum bait to investigate this new potential prey. The enormous predator approached from below at speeds exceeding 25 miles per hour. The shark's assault was swift and devastating. Rising from the depths like a living torpedo, the great white struck Tara from below with tremendous force, its massive jaws opening to reveal rows of gleaming serrated teeth. The impact drove Tara upward as the shark's jaws clamped down around her torso with bone-crushing pressure. The razor-sharp teeth sliced through her wetsuit and deep into her chest and abdomen. The crushing bite force of 4,000 pounds per square inch shattered Tara's ribcage instantly, puncturing both lungs and severing major blood vessels throughout her torso. The shark's powerful jaw muscles continued applying pressure while its head thrashed violently from side to side, the signature feeding behavior that allows great whites to tear away large chunks of flesh. The violent shaking motion severed Tara's body at the waist, separating her upper and lower torso as massive amounts of blood clouded the surrounding water. The feeding behavior continued for several more seconds as the shark consumed portions of her body before disappearing into the depths. Tara died within seconds from massive blood loss, traumatic shock, and the complete destruction of vital organs. Her entitled belief that money and demands could override natural predator behavior had proven fatally wrong. The investigation revealed Tara's deliberate equipment sabotage and violation of safety protocols. Maritime authorities implemented stricter regulations for shark cage diving operations. Tara's family filed lawsuits against the tour company, displaying the same entitled attitude that had led to her death. It was September 8, 2015, when Kendra Sullivan arrived at Ngamba Island Chimpanzee Sanctuary in Uganda, a 100-acre forested island on Lake Victoria. The sanctuary served as a refuge for orphaned and rescued chimpanzees, providing a semi-natural environment where these intelligent primates could live in social groups. Dense tropical forest covered most of the island, with designated visitor areas and security barriers designed to ensure safety. Kendra Sullivan, a 35-year-old wildlife photographer from Portland, had been commissioned by a wildlife magazine to document rehabilitation work with rescued chimpanzees. Known for her fearless approach to animal photography, she had built her reputation capturing intimate portraits of domestic and farm animals. Her extensive experience with horses, cattle, and aggressive bulls led her to believe she possessed an innate understanding of animal behavior that transcended species boundaries. Her best friend Amy Chen, a documentary filmmaker, had accompanied Kendra to capture behind-the-scenes footage. Dr. James Mukasa, the sanctuary's director, grew increasingly concerned as Kendra dismissed his safety briefings and demanded access to restricted maintenance areas for better photographs. Peter Sally, a caretaker, repeatedly warned about the unpredictable nature of these powerful animals, but Kendra brushed off his concerns as overcautious superstition. The sanctuary housed 49 rescued chimpanzees, many traumatized by poaching or the illegal pet trade. Despite their rehabilitation, these animals retained all the instincts and physical capabilities of their wild counterparts, making them extremely dangerous when encountered without proper barriers. Chimpanzees are among the most powerful primates on Earth, possessing strength approximately 5 times greater than that of an adult human. Adult males can weigh up to 150 pounds and stand over 4 feet tall, with massive chest muscles and arms capable of exerting tremendous force. Their hands possess grip strength exceeding 1,300 pounds per square inch, enough to crush bones with ease. Most notably, chimpanzees possess large canine teeth over 2 inches long, designed for both defense and establishing dominance. During the afternoon tour, Kendra became increasingly frustrated with the viewing restrictions that prevented her from capturing authentic behavioral documentation. She had specifically requested access to maintenance areas where staff entered the enclosures for cleaning and medical care. Dr. Mukasa repeatedly explained that these areas were strictly off-limits due to the extreme danger posed by direct contact with the chimpanzees. While the group was observing chimpanzees in a distant enclosure, Kendra noticed an unlocked gate leading to a maintenance corridor that provided direct access to the animal's living area. Despite explicit warnings, she slipped away from the group and entered the restricted zone, believing her experience with domestic animals had prepared her for any situation. The maintenance area brought Kendra within direct reach of Bosco, the sanctuary's dominant male, a 150-pound adult who had been rescued as an infant 15 years earlier. Bosco had shown aggressive tendencies toward unfamiliar humans and was considered one of the most dangerous animals in the facility. The powerful chimpanzee was resting near the barrier when he detected Kendra's presence. Chimpanzees are highly territorial animals that view unfamiliar humans as potential threats. Bosco immediately became agitated by Kendra's intrusion into what he considered his territory. When she approached the barrier and raised her camera to photograph him, Bosco interpreted this action as a direct challenge to his dominance. The powerful primate's response was immediate and devastating. Bosco lunged forward and grabbed Kendra's extended arm with crushing force, his grip strength of 1,300 pounds per square inch immediately fracturing the bones in her forearm. Using his tremendous upper body strength, he pulled her against the barrier. Chimpanzees instinctively target specific areas during aggressive encounters, focusing on faces, hands, and genitals to inflict maximum damage. Bosco's massive canine teeth, over 2 inches long and razor-sharp, tore into Kendra's face and neck as she was pulled against the barrier. His powerful hands ripped at her clothing while his feet kicked violently at her torso. The attack continued for nearly 2 minutes as Bosco maintained his grip, while simultaneously biting and clawing at her face, neck, and upper body. His powerful jaws crushed facial bones and tore away large sections of skin and muscle. The chimpanzee's sharp teeth severed major blood vessels in her neck, causing massive bleeding. Kendra's attempts to defend herself proved futile against the chimpanzee's overwhelming strength. Her free hand was severely mutilated by Bosco's bites, with several fingers crushed by his powerful jaws. The coordinated nature of his attack prevented any possibility of escape. Peter Solly heard Kendra's screams and immediately rushed to the maintenance area with emergency intervention equipment. Using high-pressure water hoses, he managed to drive Bosco away from the barrier after nearly 2 minutes. By the time the chimpanzee retreated, Kendra had suffered catastrophic injuries to her face, neck, hands, and arms. The massive blood loss from severed arteries, combined with shock from her traumatic injuries, proved fatal within minutes. Kendra died from hypovolemic shock and facial trauma before emergency medical services could reach the remote island location. The investigation focused on security failures that allowed visitor access to restricted areas. The Ugandan Wildlife Authority implemented enhanced security measures, while Kendra's family filed lawsuits against the facility. It was April 14, 2018, when Monica Barrett arrived at Everglades National Park in Florida, one of the largest tropical wilderness areas in the United States. The vast wetland ecosystem stretched across 1.5 million acres of sawgrass marshes and shallow waterways that served as home to some of North America's most dangerous predators. The park's intricate network of channels created the perfect habitat for massive American alligators. Monica Barrett, a 44-year-old divorce attorney from Miami, had booked a solo kayak tour to clear her head after a difficult custody case. Known for her aggressive courtroom tactics and confrontational personality, she had built her legal career on intimidating opponents and refusing to back down from any challenge. Her reputation for getting her way through sheer force of will had created a dangerous sense of entitlement. Tommy Rodriguez, a 52-year-old tour guide with over 20 years of experience, had immediately recognized Monica as a problematic client during the morning safety briefing. She had interrupted his presentation multiple times, claiming her legal background made her smarter than some swamp guide, and had threatened to file lawsuits when he tried to enforce basic safety protocols. Park Ranger Sarah Kim had also attempted to explain the dangers of alligator nesting season, but Monica dismissed her warnings as government overreach. The timing of Monica's visit coincided with peak alligator breeding season, when territorial males become extremely aggressive and protective of their nesting areas. During this period, park officials typically restrict access to certain waterways and post warning signs throughout the most dangerous zones. American alligators are among North America's most formidable apex predators, with adult males reaching lengths of up to 14 feet and weights exceeding 1,000 pounds. These ancient reptiles possess one of the most powerful bite forces in the animal kingdom, capable of exerting over 3,000 pounds per square inch of crushing pressure. Their massive jaws contain 74 to 80 razor-sharp teeth designed for gripping and crushing prey. Alligators can remain motionless for hours before exploding into action with lightning speed. During the guided tour, Tommy repeatedly warned about staying within designated channels due to active alligator nesting season. The park had posted numerous warning signs around known nesting sites, where territorial males were guarding their offspring with deadly aggression. Monica became increasingly belligerent, accusing Tommy of limiting her constitutional rights and threatening legal action. Despite Tommy's attempts to maintain group cohesion, Monica broke away from the guided tour and paddled her kayak toward a restricted lagoon, clearly marked with multiple warning signs. She was determined to investigate what appeared to be interesting wildlife activity, claiming she had every right as a tax-paying citizen to explore any area of the national park. The restricted lagoon served as a primary nesting area, for a massive 12-foot bull alligator that had been actively defending his territory for 3 weeks. The 800-pound reptile had established his dominance and had already driven off several smaller males. The presence of Monica's kayak immediately triggered the alligator's most aggressive defensive instincts. The bull alligator detected the vibrations from Monica's paddle strokes within seconds. The massive reptile had been resting motionless beneath the surface, perfectly camouflaged among the submerged vegetation. The alligator's attack was swift and devastating. The 800-pound predator launched itself from the water with explosive force, its massive jaws clamping down on the front section of Monica's kayak. The impact capsized her kayak instantly, throwing her into the murky water directly in front of the enraged reptile. As Monica struggled in the water, disoriented and panicked, the alligator immediately identified her as a threat to his nesting territory. The massive reptile's jaws found purchase on Monica's torso, his razor-sharp teeth puncturing through her life jacket and deep into her chest and abdomen. The crushing bite force shattered multiple ribs instantly while puncturing both lungs and severing major blood vessels. The alligator then began its signature killing technique known as the death roll, a violent spinning motion designed to disorient prey and cause massive internal trauma. The 800-pound reptile rotated rapidly in the water, spinning Monica's body while maintaining its crushing grip. The violent rotation generated a tremendous force that tore muscles and caused catastrophic internal injuries. The death roll continued for over a minute as the alligator spun through the water with Monica trapped in its jaws. The violent motion filled her punctured lungs with water, while the crushing pressure prevented any possibility of breathing. Her shattered ribs were ground against each other, causing additional internal bleeding. The combination of massive internal trauma, drowning, and blood loss proved fatal within 2 minutes. Monica's struggles gradually ceased as the alligator continued its death roll. The massive reptile eventually released her lifeless body, which floated to the surface. Tommy Rodriguez immediately radioed for emergency assistance, but rescue teams were unable to reach the remote lagoon in time. It was August 19, 2017, when Felicity Grant arrived at Boulder County Open Space in Colorado, a vast wilderness area known for its rugged terrain and diverse wildlife population. The mountainous region stretched across thousands of acres of dense forest and winding trails that attracted outdoor enthusiasts. However, these same wilderness areas also served as prime habitat for mountain lions and other dangerous predators. Felicity Grant, a 39-year-old fitness influencer from Denver with over 5,000 social media followers, had planned what she called her ultimate wilderness transformation experience. Known for her entitled attitude and belief that her athletic superiority made her exempt from rules, she had already caused multiple confrontations at the park entrance. Her demanding personality became evident when she berated the teenage park attendant for suggesting she read safety guidelines, claiming someone of her fitness level didn't need advice from minimum wage employees. Park Ranger Tom Bradley had attempted to brief Felicity on recent mountain lion activity during her permit application process. The area had experienced multiple cougar sightings over the previous month, including aggressive encounters that resulted in temporary trail closures. Felicity became increasingly hostile, interrupting Tom repeatedly and demanding to speak to his supervisor about what she called his incompetent fear-mongering. Fellow hiker Maria Santos, a local trail runner, had also tried to warn Felicity about the dangers of solo hiking during dawn hours. Felicity's response was swift and cruel, telling Maria that jealous locals like her were obviously trying to sabotage successful influencers who were clearly in better shape than pathetic weekend warriors. Felicity had specifically chosen the Rabbit Ears Pass Trail for her solo dawn run, deliberately ignoring the trail closure signs that she claimed didn't apply to elite athletes like herself. She had torn down several warning notices, stating that taxpayers like her had every right to use public trails. Mountain lions are among North America's most efficient apex predators, perfectly adapted for hunting in mountainous terrain. Adult males can weigh up to 180 pounds and measure over 8 feet in length, with powerful hind legs capable of propelling them up to 40 feet in a single leap. Their retractable claws, measuring up to 4 inches in length, are designed for gripping prey, while their 4-inch canine teeth are perfectly positioned for delivering fatal neck bites that sever the spinal cord. These solitary hunters are primarily ambush predators that prefer to attack from behind and above, using incredible stealth and patience to get within striking distance before launching devastating surprise attacks. Mountain lions are particularly drawn to prey that exhibits erratic movement patterns, heavy breathing, or other signs of distress. Felicity began her solo trail run at 5:30 a.m., deliberately choosing the pre-dawn hours to avoid what she called inferior hikers. She wore noise-canceling headphones playing loud electronic music and carried a backpack containing raw steaks for her post-workout protein meal. The combination of her erratic running pattern, heavy breathing, and the scent of fresh meat created perfect conditions to attract a hunting mountain lion. A 140-pound male mountain lion had been actively hunting in the area and had established a territory that included the Rabbit Ears Pass Trail. The powerful predator detected the scent of fresh meat from over a mile away and began tracking Felicity's movement through the forest. The cougar began stalking Felicity along the ridge above the trail, using rocks and trees to remain hidden while closing the distance. As Felicity rounded a sharp bend, the mountain lion positioned itself on a large boulder approximately 15 feet above the path. When Felicity passed below the boulder, completely unaware due to her loud music and arrogant belief that her fitness made her invulnerable, the mountain lion launched itself in a devastating aerial attack. The 140-pound predator struck Felicity from behind with tremendous force, his powerful hind claws raking down her back, while his front paws wrapped around her shoulders and neck. The mountain lion's 4-inch canine teeth immediately found their target, clamping down on the back of Felicity's neck with surgical precision. Mountain lions kill their prey through a specific technique that targets the cervical vertebrae, and this male executed the attack with deadly efficiency. His powerful jaws applied crushing pressure of over 400 pounds per square inch directly to Felicity's spinal cord, severing the connection between her brain and body instantly. The bite penetrated deep into the neck muscles and fractured the vertebrae, causing immediate paralysis from the neck down. The cougar maintained his grip on Felicity's neck while using his powerful claws to secure his position. His hind legs continued raking down her spine and legs, opening deep wounds that bled profusely. Within 2 minutes, Felicity had died from a combination of spinal cord severance, massive blood loss, and suffocation caused by the crushing pressure on her neck and throat. The mountain lion then began dragging her body off the main trail toward a secluded area where he could feed undisturbed. Felicity's body was discovered 3 days later by a search and rescue team organized when she failed to return. The discovery location and condition of the remains were consistent with a mountain lion attack and subsequent caching behavior. It was August 22, 2016, and the suffocating Florida heat had already claimed 2 lives that summer in Broward County. But Brenda Holloway was about to become the 3rd casualty of a different kind of predator. Brenda Holloway, 62, had spent 37 years processing insurance claims before retiring to become the self-appointed guardian of homeowner association regulations. Brenda had earned her reputation through consistent enforcement of community standards. She carried a laminated copy of the HOA bylaws in her purse and had personally issued multiple violation notices in her 3 years of retirement. That Tuesday afternoon, Brenda had spotted a 15-year-old feeding ducks near the retention pond with a bag of bread. Witnesses said she marched across the perfectly maintained lawn. The teen had been visiting his grandmother in the community and was unaware of the feeding restrictions that Brenda enforced. When she confiscated his bread bag and began lecturing him about creating dependencies in wildlife, several residents emerged from their air-conditioned homes to watch the familiar scene unfold. The retention pond stretched across 2 acres of the community's center, its murky green surface disguising the ecosystem beneath. American alligators are perfectly adapted ambush predators, capable of remaining motionless for hours. Adults can reach lengths of 10 to 11 feet, still capable of lethal force. Once they secure prey, their instinct is to perform death rolls that disorient victims while tearing flesh and breaking bones. Likely determined to make her point about feeding restrictions, restrictions, Brenda strode directly to the pond's edge with the confiscated bread bag. The water appeared calm, obscuring any movement beneath. Witnesses said she positioned herself on the concrete retaining wall, leaning forward to dispose of the bread by throwing it into the center of the pond, rather than near the shore where animals could access it. The attack came without warning as Brenda extended her arm over the water. An alligator surged forward from a shallow submerged shelf just below the retaining wall, its jaws clamping around her right forearm with devastating force. The impact knocked her off balance as the reptile's weight, later estimated by wildlife officers as consistent with an 11-foot animal, dragged her into the murky water. Her screams echoed across the community as the alligator submerged her almost immediately, initiating violent rolling movements consistent with predatory restraint behavior. Witnesses watched in horror as Brenda disappeared beneath the surface, the water churning violently around the thrashing forms. She resurfaced only for a matter of seconds, gasping and flailing with her left arm, blood spreading rapidly from catastrophic injuries to her right limb. The alligator maintained its grip, rolling again in short, forceful rotations that stripped tissue and fractured bone. Her desperate attempts to reach the concrete edge were futile against the reptile's overwhelming strength. She was pulled under again almost immediately, and the struggle ended. The entire attack lasted well under 2 minutes. The teenager ran to the nearest house and called 911. Deputies arrived within 12 minutes, followed by wildlife officers who brought specialized equipment for water recovery operations. The alligator had disappeared into the pond's depths with Brenda's body, forcing officers to wait until evening, when the reptile was more likely to surface. Brenda's remains were recovered at 7:30 p.m. after wildlife officers located and euthanized an alligator believed to be responsible for the attack. The medical examiner determined that death resulted from massive trauma and drowning. Tissue analysis confirmed that repeated feeding activity had habituated local alligators to human presence. The Palms at Cypress Creek installed reinforced fencing and restricted access barriers averaging 6 feet in height around the pond perimeter, and posted multiple warning signs in English and Spanish. Later safety reviews noted that years of residents feeding wildlife had created the dangerous conditions that led to Brenda's death, though no formal admission of liability was ever made public. It was May 3, 2017, and the African sun hung mercilessly over a private reserve, casting harsh shadows across the savannah, where a woman would draw her final breath beneath a predator's crushing jaws. Madison McCrae was a 27-year-old from Phoenix, Arizona, a retail worker, known among her co-workers for demanding manager attention over trivial issues and loudly insisting on better service. People said she had cultivated a sense of entitlement that extended to every aspect of her life. She had scraped together savings from part-time work to fund a South African safari, her first trip outside the United States, but she likely saw it less as a chance to explore wildlife and more as an opportunity to enforce her expectations on the world and to capture dramatic content for Instagram. Madison had booked the cheapest safari package available, yet the private reserve said she constantly complained that the accommodations and itinerary weren't up to standard. She frequently demanded exceptions from guides, snapping at them when things didn't match the experience she believed she was owed. Their guide had already spotted a pride of lions resting near a seasonal watering hole, the massive male lying in the shade of a marula tree within established stalking distance, estimated at 80 to 100 yards from the vehicle. African lions are apex predators capable of reaching speeds of up to 40 miles per hour in short bursts, with males weighing up to 420 pounds and possessing jaws strong enough to collapse a large ungulate's windpipe within seconds. The guide had emphasized multiple times that morning that guests must remain in their vehicles at all times, explaining that lions view humans outside of vehicles as prey or territorial threats, rather than the non-threatening observers they appear to be when seated in safari trucks. Madison had listened to the safety briefing while scrolling through her phone, occasionally asking when they would get closer to the animals for better photos. The vehicle was stationary with the engine idling, positioned on open ground with no fencing or barriers. Guests remained seated, as required, while Johan momentarily turned his attention to a radio call. Madison immediately began complaining about the distance to the lions, arguing that her photos would be worthless from so far away. Other tourists were visibly uncomfortable as the guide tried to calm her down. She had noticed the male lion lying motionless and misinterpreted his stillness as deep sleep. Without permission and in direct violation of protocol, Madison stepped down from the vehicle, clutching her camera. Relying on proximity and her sudden movement alone, she moved several yards away from the truck, closing the distance further while the lion remained low and facing her. The male lion's response was immediate and terrifying. His head snapped up, locking onto Madison as she raised her camera well within the animal's ambush zone. Lions are ambush predators, and this male had already been positioned to stalk from close range. He rose to his feet with fluid, controlled power. As Madison finally grasped the scale of her error, she turned to run, but witnesses said her boots slipped on loose gravel as the lion lunged forward. The lion covered the distance in seconds, his forepaws slamming into Madison's upper back and driving her face first into the ground. The lion clamped his jaws around Madison's throat, causing rapid incapacitation, followed by loss of consciousness. The pressure of the bite and the force of her fall caused catastrophic cervical trauma. Blood spread rapidly beneath her as the lion maintained his hold until her body went slack. The lion then seized Madison by the shoulder and dragged her toward a dense cluster of thorn bushes, a common behavior intended to secure a kill away from perceived threats and scavengers. The remaining guests watched in paralyzed silence as the lion stood over the body, his posture rigid and alert. The guide radioed park control immediately, his voice controlled as he reported a probable wildlife fatality and requested armed assistance. Armed rangers arrived approximately 14 minutes later. The lion was driven off using vehicles and warning shots, retreating into the brush before the team approached. Madison was pronounced dead at the scene. Her body was later transported for formal examination, which determined the cause of death to be asphyxiation due to tracheal collapse and massive vascular injury to the neck, with contributing blunt force trauma from the initial takedown. The reserve conducted a comprehensive review of its safety procedures. Investigators concluded that existing protocols had been followed and that Madison's decision to exit the vehicle and provoke the animal directly led to the fatal encounter. The death was ruled accidental. The lion was not euthanized, with authorities determining that the animal had behaved in accordance with natural instincts. It was July 22, 2016, and the murky waters of the Daintree River held secrets that had claimed lives for millennia. Secrets that Carla Wenrick would discover in the most horrific way possible as the ancient predator beneath the surface prepared for an attack. Carla was a 41-year-old human resources consultant from Sydney, known throughout her mid-tier consulting firm for her aggressive personality and relentless complaints about what she perceived as inadequate service. Her colleagues privately described her as someone who treated every interaction as a battle to be won. Carla had built her reputation on never backing down from confrontation, whether berating restaurant servers or demanding refunds from hotels. This trip to Queensland represented Carla's first real vacation in 3 years, funded by a recent promotion. Her colleagues said that she had specifically chosen the Daintree River cruise after reading online reviews that promised close encounters with saltwater crocodiles. Her stated goal was to capture dramatic photos for her social media account, which she used primarily to document her travels and criticize businesses that failed to meet her expectations. The Daintree River wound through ancient rainforest, where saltwater crocodiles had ruled as apex predators. These massive reptiles can grow up to 20 feet long and weigh well over a ton, with a bite force exceeding 3,700 pounds per square inch. Primarily ambush predators, saltwater crocodiles rely on stealth and positioning rather than pursuit, capable of explosive bursts of speed both in water and at the water's edge. The tour guide, Jamie, was a weathered local who had been running river cruises for 15 years without incident. That morning, he had specifically warned the 12 passengers about maintaining distance from the water and remaining seated at all times. He pointed out fresh slide marks on the muddy banks, evidence of large crocodiles moving between water and land, and explained that the river's murky water made it impossible to see submerged animals. Several passengers nodded seriously, but others noted Carla rolling her eyes and muttering audibly about overcautious tour guides. 20 minutes into the cruise, the guide said he spotted a massive saltwater crocodile floating near a fallen tree, its eyes and nostrils barely visible above the waterline. He estimated the animal at roughly 18 feet long, explaining to passengers that this was likely a territorial male. As the boat maintained a safe distance of about 50 yards, Carla became increasingly agitated, loudly complaining that they were too far away for good photos. She demanded that they move closer, dismissing the guide's explanations about safety protocols as gatekeeping wildlife. When other passengers began backing away from the railings as Jamie had instructed, Carla declared that crocodiles were lazy unless provoked. Despite repeated warnings, she stood up and moved to the boat's edge, leaning over the waist-high aluminum railing, her phone ready. Jamie immediately cut the engine and ordered Carla to sit down, stepping toward her and reaching for her arm, but she ignored him completely. Leaning farther over the railing, she began slapping the water's surface with her open palm, trying to provoke a reaction from the distant crocodile for her video. The other tourists watched in horror as she continued her aggressive behavior, some pleading with her to stop. Jamie restarted the engine in an attempt to back the boat away, but Carla had already drawn the attention of a predator that had silently repositioned beneath the surface, responding to vibration and disturbance. The attack came without warning. The crocodile had submerged and approached the boat underwater. In a single explosive movement, it surged upward from directly beneath where Carla leaned over the railing. The massive jaws, lined with over 60 conical teeth designed to grip and crush, clamped onto her lower torso. The force of the strike violently bent her body over the railing, pulling her center of mass toward the water. Witnesses later described hearing a loud cracking sound as the crocodile's jaws closed, consistent with severe skeletal trauma, later documented by the coroner. Blood spread rapidly across the water's surface as the predator initiated a death roll, a spinning maneuver used to disable and dismember prey. Based on the pattern of injuries, Carla's spine was believed to have fractured during the first rotation, her body twisting unnaturally as the crocodile's mass rolled through the water. Within seconds, she was dragged completely under, the churning water turning crimson as the crocodile continued its violent feeding behavior. Passengers watched in frozen horror as the water boiled with movement, occasional glimpses of the crocodile's massive tail breaking the surface. The attack lasted less than 30 seconds, from initial strike to final submersion, as estimated by multiple witnesses. Jamie immediately radioed emergency services. Several passengers reported that Carla's phone disappeared beneath the surface during the initial strike, leaving no usable footage of the attack. Marine rescue units arrived approximately 20 minutes later, but there was nothing to be done except begin a search. The crocodile had disappeared into the river's depths, behavior consistent with retreating to a submerged cache site. Carla's body was recovered the following day, lodged against a submerged branch nearly half a mile downstream. The coroner's report documented massive trauma to the torso and pelvis, with spiral fractures characteristic of rotational force, consistent with a crocodile death roll. Cause of death was listed as massive blood loss, with drowning as a contributing factor. The incident received only brief regional news coverage, with authorities emphasizing that the victim had ignored multiple safety warnings. The cruise operator implemented stricter physical enforcement of seating rules and clearer exclusion protocols, while Carla's family quietly deleted her social media accounts. It was September 11, 2016, in the Komodo National Park's Lo Liang sector, where the ancient predators that ruled these volcanic islands. The morning air shimmered with heat as tour groups gathered near the ranger station, unaware that within hours, the pristine wilderness would be stained with blood and the screams of a woman who believed rules were merely suggestions. Maribel Quayle was a 44-year-old purchasing coordinator from Perth, known among her colleagues for her stubborn independence and casual disregard for authority. She had booked a park-authorized but bare-bones group trek, drawn by photos of the famous Komodo dragons, and determined to prove that expensive guided experiences were unnecessary for seasoned travelers. Her colleagues said Maribel prided herself on being practical and no-nonsense, dismissing what she called tourist theater, designed to extract extra fees from gullible visitors. Her travel stories, retold by friends and colleagues, documented a pattern of ignoring local warnings and guides, from swimming in restricted areas in Bali to hiking alone in remote parts of Thailand. This trip to Komodo was meant to be the crown jewel of her Southeast Asian adventure, and she had specifically chosen the lowest-cost tour tier permitted by the park, confident that her instincts would keep her safe where others needed supervision. Maribel arrived wearing bright red flip-flops and a dismissive attitude toward the mandatory safety briefing, standing at the back of the group and intermittently checking her phone, as rangers explained the dangers of the world's largest lizard species. Komodo dragons are not cooperative hunters, but multiple individuals are often independently drawn to the same bleeding prey. Komodo dragons are apex predators that can reach 9 to 10 feet in length and exceed 150 pounds, equipped with serrated teeth and venom glands that release anticoagulant compounds, compounding hemorrhage over minutes. While bacterial infection is no longer considered the primary killing mechanism, it remains a serious secondary risk. During the mandatory briefing, the head ranger had been explicit. Remain within approximately 15 to 20 feet of the guide at all times, never sit or crouch, and never leave the marked trail. He warned the group that an adult dragon had been observed moving through the area earlier that morning, increasing the likelihood of close encounters. Maribel scoffed when told her footwear was inappropriate, insisting she had worn flip-flops across Asia without incident. When Kadek warned that open wounds, bright colors, and strong scents could elevate risk, Maribel laughed audibly, dismissing the guidance. 20 minutes into the trek, as temperatures climbed past 95 degrees Fahrenheit, Maribel began lagging behind, complaining about the heat and the guide's pace. When the group paused to observe a dragon resting near a watering hole, Maribel noticed a shaded rocky outcrop about 50 yards away and announced she was going to sit there. The ranger ordered her to return immediately, but she waved him off and continued walking. She sat down, removed her flip-flops, and applied sunscreen. What Maribel didn't realize was that an adult Komodo dragon had been moving intermittently through this corridor since early morning, following residual scent trails from recent prey activity. The reptile emerged silently from a low scrub behind her. When Maribel noticed it, she attempted to shoo it away with her flip-flop, a gesture that registered as erratic movement. The dragon struck from a shallow shelf just below the retaining terrain, clamping onto her left foot. The serrated teeth sank into her skin as Maribel screamed. Venom-induced anticoagulation compounded the hemorrhage, causing her movements to slow within minutes. She fell backward as the dragon released and rebit before withdrawing briefly. Blood pooled beneath her as shock began to set in. As Maribel attempted to crawl, the blood scent attracted a second dragon, which arrived independently and struck in short, violent bursts. The attacks were brief, with the animals retreating between bites. Rangers eventually located her, positioned at a distance, used standard deterrence tools including forked control poles and shouted commands, protocols designed to redirect dragons without provoking escalation. They radioed for emergency response immediately, but limited visibility of the uneven volcanic terrain delayed access. Backup personnel reached the site approximately 35 minutes after the initial attack, by which time Maribel had no detectable pulse. She was transported by boat to Labuan Bajo, where she was pronounced dead shortly after arrival. The coroner's report listed the cause of death as exsanguination following traumatic bite injuries with venom-induced anticoagulation. Maribel's funeral was held quietly in Perth a week later, attended by close family and a few colleagues who described her as adventurous but headstrong. The incident received brief local coverage, with park officials reiterating that the victim's decision to leave the group directly violated safety protocol. Tours resumed weeks later without structural changes. It was October 3rd, 2014, and the moonless night around Lake Naivasha would witness the brutal consequences of human arrogance, as Maurice Otieno learned too late that hippos kill more people in Africa than any other large mammal, their massive jaws designed to crush boats and bones with equal efficiency. Maris was a 52-year-old operations manager at one of Lake Naivasha's largest flower farms, a position she had held for 8 years through a combination of aggressive management and cost-cutting measures that impressed foreign investors. Known among workers for her impatience with what she considered excuses, Maris had built her reputation on solving problems through direct action rather than accommodation. Her workers described her as someone who viewed wildlife as obstacles to productivity, frequently complaining about the hippos that crossed farm property nightly on their way between grazing areas and the lake. The flower export business was highly competitive, and her workers said she prided herself on maintaining schedules that other farms couldn't match. Recent hippo activity had damaged irrigation lines and trampled flower beds, costing the farm thousands of dollars in lost revenue. Maris had grown increasingly frustrated with what she saw as the workers' passive acceptance of the situation. When the farm's wildlife service liaison suggested installing barriers and lighting to redirect the hippo's path, Maris dismissed the recommendation as expensive and unnecessary. Instead, she had ordered workers to use emergency flares and noisemakers to drive the animals away from the farm's main pathways. She wanted to establish human dominance over the hippos and force them to find alternative routes that wouldn't impact production. Lake Naivasha's shoreline was dotted with papyrus reeds and acacia trees, creating a maze of paths that hippos had used for generations to move between water and grazing areas. Hippos are among Africa's most dangerous animals, with adult bulls weighing up to 8,000 pounds and possessing jaws that can open to 150 degrees, revealing canine teeth up to 20 inches long. Their bite force exceeds 1,800 pounds per square inch, easily capable of snapping a canoe in half or crushing human bones to powder. Farm workers had repeatedly warned Maris that harassing hippos was dangerous, explaining that the animals became increasingly aggressive when their established paths were disrupted. The night security guard, a local man named Joseph Kamau, had specifically told her that recent flare harassment had made the hippos more unpredictable and territorial. Earlier that week, workers had reported seeing a large bull hippo lingering near the farm's main pathway instead of returning directly to the lake after grazing. Fresh dung and deep hoof prints in the mud indicated the animal was spending more time in the area, a behavioral change that experienced locals recognized as a warning sign. On the night of October 3rd, Maris decided to personally oversee the harassment operation, bringing 3 workers and Kamau to the main pathway where hippos typically crossed around midnight. She carried a powerful flashlight and 2 emergency flares, instructing the team to spread out along a 200-foot section of the path. Against Kamau's advice, Maris positioned herself at the front of the group, approximately 50 feet ahead of the others. When the familiar sound of hippos moving through the reeds became audible around 11:45 p.m., she immediately lit a flare and began advancing toward the noise, waving the bright flame and shouting to drive the animals away. The workers behind her watched as Maris's flashlight beams swept back and forth through the tall grass beside the path. For several minutes, the hippos seemed to retreat toward the lake, their heavy breathing and splashing growing more distant. Kamau called for Maris to return to the group, but she continued forward, determined to ensure the hippos had completely abandoned the area. Suddenly, the workers saw Maris's flashlight suddenly stop moving. In the silence that followed, they heard a deep, explosive exhale, the warning sound hippos make before attacking. Before anyone could react, a massive bull hippo charged from the tall grass at close range, its enormous bulk moving with shocking speed, despite weighing between 6,000 to 8,000 pounds. The attack was swift and devastating. 2 workers witnessed the hippo strike Maris down with its massive head. She fell backward onto the muddy path as the bull reared up, its cavernous mouth opening. In a single crushing bite, the hippo clamped its jaws across Maris's waist. The hippo's bite force catastrophically crushed her pelvis and lower spine, causing her lower body to go completely limp, while her torso remained trapped in the animal's massive jaws, Maris's body becoming increasingly mangled with each violent movement. Within moments, the hippo neutralized the perceived threat, delivering additional crushing bites to her torso and abdomen. The witnesses watched in frozen horror as Maris's body was thrown aside, her clothing torn and soaked with blood, the bull snorting loudly as it asserted control over the pathway. The entire attack lasted in under a minute. After disabling and killing the intruder, the hippo retreated toward the lake, leaving behind a severely mutilated body and a spreading pool of blood on the muddy path. Kamau began running toward the farm buildings to call for help. Farm security contacted emergency services immediately, but responders didn't arrive for nearly 30 minutes due to the remote location and poor road conditions. By then, there was little to recover, except extensive traumatic injuries and scattered personal effects. The coroner's report noted massive trauma to the torso and abdomen, with the cause of death listed as exsanguination and crushing injuries consistent with a hippo attack. The incident was ruled a case of wildlife provocation, with authorities noting that harassment of hippos violated Wildlife Service guidelines. The flower farm installed barriers and lighting along hippo pathways and implemented strict policies prohibiting worker interaction with wildlife.
Evening of March 12, 2016 brought spectacular sunset conditions to Cairns, Queensland, Australia. For Bethany Rodriguez, 44, a successful insurance claim manager from Phoenix, Arizona, this would become her final swim. Bethany had arrived at the upscale resort 3 days earlier with sky-high expectations and an attitude that had already made her notorious among the staff. As someone who prided herself on always getting her way through persistence and complaints, she had spent every moment since arrival demanding upgrades, special treatment, and access to areas that other guests simply accepted as off-limits. Her husband Mark had grown increasingly embarrassed by her behavior, watching helplessly as she berated housekeeping staff for not providing enough towels, demanding that the restaurant kitchen prepare meals that weren't on the menu, and insisted that the concierge personally escort her to every activity. The main pool situation had become her first major battleground. When she complained loudly to the pool attendant about children splashing near her, demanding they be moved to a different area, she was politely told that the pool was open to all guests. This response triggered her immediate escalation to the manager, where she spent 20 minutes explaining her status as a premium guest and her expectation of adult-only pool time. When that failed, she turned her attention to the beach access, arguing with lifeguards about the designated swimming areas and insisting that the roped-off sections were just suggestions rather than actual boundaries. She had already been warned twice about swimming outside the safe zone, each time responding with lectures about her swimming abilities and her rights as a paying customer. But it was the beautiful secluded lagoon visible from her balcony that became her obsession. She had approached the staff multiple times, each interaction becoming more heated as she was repeatedly told the area was completely off limits due to wildlife dangers. She had cornered the resort manager that morning, demanding to know exactly what wildlife posed such a threat that paying guests couldn't access what was clearly part of the resort property. When told about saltwater crocodiles, she had laughed dismissively and pulled out her phone to show him statistics about crocodile attacks, explaining that she had done her research and knew the actual risks were minimal. The area in question was a pristine mangrove lagoon, separated from the resort by multiple barriers and warning signs. Danger signs were posted in English, Japanese, and German, along with detailed explanations about the saltwater crocodiles that inhabited these waters. At 6:30 p.m., as the golden hour light began to fade, Bethany made her move. She had changed into her most expensive swimsuit and brought her waterproof phone to document what she planned to present as evidence of the resort's excessive caution. She found a section where the fencing had been damaged by recent storms, creating a gap that allowed access without actually breaking any physical barriers. Saltwater crocodiles are among the world's most efficient predators, virtually unchanged by millions of years of evolution. These apex predators can grow up to 23 feet in length and weigh over a ton, with a bite force of 3,700 pounds per square inch, the strongest of any living animal. She floated peacefully for nearly 10 minutes, watching tropical birds in the mangrove canopy above and composing the triumphant social media posts she would share. What Bethany didn't know was that a 14-foot saltwater crocodile had been hunting in the deeper sections of the lagoon when she entered the water. The massive reptile had detected her presence immediately through vibrations in the water and had been slowly positioning itself for an optimal attack angle. The attack came without warning, a sudden, violent eruption of water as the crocodile launched himself from the depths with explosive force. Bethany's scream was cut short as massive jaws clamped down with crushing power, and the water churned violently as the predator executed his death roll, a technique perfected over millions of years of evolution. Within moments, the lagoon returned to an eerie calm, broken only by ripples that quickly faded in the evening breeze. Resort security, alerted by guests who had heard Bethany's brief scream and the violent churning of water, found only her belongings on the shore and her phone floating in the lagoon, still recording her final moments. Bethany's death triggered the largest tourism safety investigation in Queensland's history. Her husband filed a massive lawsuit resulting in a $12 million settlement, the largest tourism-related payout in Australian history. The settlement led to mandatory crocodile proofing of all resort properties within 50 kilometers of known crocodile habitats, costing the tourism industry over $200 million in infrastructure upgrades. The afternoon of July 28, 2017 brought ideal hiking conditions to Olympic National Park, Washington. For Heather Thompson, 50, a successful corporate trainer from Seattle, this would become her final opportunity to prove her superiority over what she considered incompetent government bureaucrats and their ridiculous safety regulations. Heather had built her business on the premise that she knew better than everyone else how to provide authentic wilderness experiences. Her corporate retreats were marketed specifically to executives and professionals who were tired of being treated like children by overly cautious park services and tour operators. She was leading 8 office colleagues on what she had designed as an elite leadership retreat, constantly reminding them that they were getting an experience that went far beyond what ordinary tourists receive. Her group consisted of accountants, marketing professionals, and middle managers who had paid premium prices for what Heather promised would be an authentic wilderness challenge. From the moment they arrived at Olympic National Park, Heather had been vocal about her disdain for what she called government overreach in wilderness management. She had spent the entire drive to the trailhead explaining to her guests how park rangers were typically inexperienced college graduates who had never actually spent serious time in real wilderness situations, unlike herself. The trouble began when they reached the official trailhead and encountered fresh warnings about recent black bear activity in the area. Multiple signs warned hikers to stay on designated trails, make noise while hiking, and report any bear sightings immediately. Heather's reaction was immediate and predictable. She rolled her eyes dramatically and launched into one of her signature lectures about government incompetence. She gathered her group around her and began explaining, in her most condescending tone, how these warnings were typical examples of bureaucratic overreach designed to keep people dependent on guided tours and official programs. She made sure her clients understood that following these restrictive warnings would mean missing out on the authentic leadership experience they had paid premium prices to receive. 5:15 p.m., after delivering another lecture about how real outdoor professionals like herself knew how to assess actual risks versus bureaucratic paranoia, Heather made the decision to take her group onto an unmarked trail. When they encountered fresh black bear tracks and scat on the trail, Heather's response was entirely predictable. She gathered her nervous clients around the evidence and began another impromptu lecture about how this was exactly the kind of thing that would send less qualified guides running back to the safety of designated trails. Black bears are North America's most common bear species, typically weighing between 200 and 400 pounds, but capable of reaching 600 pounds during peak feeding season. While generally more timid than grizzlies, black bears become extremely aggressive when defending food sources or feeling cornered. A 250-pound male black bear had been feeding in a rich berry patch nearby, building up the fat reserves he would need to survive the coming winter hibernation. When he heard the loud, confident voice of Heather explaining bear behavior to her group, particularly her dismissive comments about park ranger competence, his defensive instincts immediately activated. The encounter happened suddenly but not without warning. The bear emerged from dense undergrowth about 40 yards ahead of the group, clearly agitated by their presence in his territory during the critical feeding season. Instead of immediately implementing proper bear safety protocols, Heather saw this as the perfect teaching moment to demonstrate her superior wilderness expertise. She positioned herself between the bear and her clients, speaking in what she believed was an authoritative tone about proper bear encounter techniques. She explained to her terrified group that this was exactly the kind of authentic wildlife experience that made her services superior to sanitized park tours. For several tense minutes, the standoff continued. The bear showed classic defensive behavior, huffing, jaw-popping, and making short bluff charges that stopped well short of the group. But instead of recognizing these as serious escalation warnings, Heather treated them as validation of her expertise, continuing to lecture her clients about bear behavior and wilderness leadership principles. Her voice grew louder and more authoritative as she demonstrated what she called proper bear dominance techniques, completely misreading the animal's increasingly agitated state. She explained that the bear was simply testing their resolve and that maintaining confident leadership would cause him to retreat. The situation deteriorated rapidly when one of her clients, panicked by the bear's increasingly aggressive bluff charges, broke from the group and ran. This triggered the bear's chase instinct, and the 250-pound predator immediately pursued the fleeing human. Heather, still convinced of her expertise, ran toward the bear while shouting instructions about proper bear encounter techniques. The bear, now fully committed to protecting his territory, turned on Heather with the full force of an animal that recognized no human authority or self-proclaimed expertise. Her final moments were spent discovering that her superiority complex and dismissive attitude towards safety warnings had not actually made her the wilderness expert she believed herself to be. The attack occurred in a thick forest during the bear's peak foraging time. While her sacrifice did allow her fleeing client to escape, and her group's panic screaming eventually drove the bear away, Heather sustained injuries that proved fatal, despite immediate first aid attempts and rapid evacuation by helicopter rescue teams. Heather's death resulted in the most significant changes to commercial wilderness guiding regulations in Washington state history, ironically implementing exactly the kind of government oversight she had spent her career opposing. Her corporate training business was continued by her business partner, who transformed it into a wilderness safety education company that now emphasizes the importance of respecting both wildlife and the expertise of Park Service professionals. The afternoon of November 5, 2013 brought unreasonably warm weather to rural Oklahoma. For Stephanie Stevens, 46, a successful pharmaceutical sales representative from Atlanta, this would become her final volunteer session. Stephanie had discovered a genuine love for wildlife conservation and had been volunteering at a small roadside zoo facility for over a year, contributing both time and substantial financial support to help care for rescued exotic animals. Unlike many roadside operations, this facility focused on education and rescue rather than entertainment. Her pharmaceutical background had proven valuable to the facility. She understood animal medications and had helped establish better veterinary care protocols. Her social media presence had gradually shifted toward wildlife education as she learned more about conservation challenges. The facility owner, David, had initially been grateful for Stephanie's expertise and financial support. She had helped fund improved enclosures, better veterinary care, and educational programs. However, as her involvement deepened, She had begun requesting increased access to the animals for educational content creation, pushing against safety protocols that David knew were essential. Her relationship with Raja, the facility's Bengal tiger, had developed over months of careful interaction through barriers. She had studied tiger behavior extensively and had created educational content that helped people understand the complexity of big cat behavior and the challenges of caring for these magnificent predators in captivity. At 3:45 p.m., Stephanie arrived for what she planned as a routine volunteer session, but she had been increasingly frustrated by the limitations on her ability to create the kind of educational content she believed could make a real difference in wildlife conservation awareness. Her social media following had grown substantially, and she felt the responsibility to provide increasingly engaging content. As they walked toward Raja's enclosure, Stephanie brought up her ideas for an educational video series with David. She expressed her belief that her followers were responding well to the tiger content, and they could reach more people by showing more authentic interactions with the animals. Bengal tigers are among the world's most powerful predators, with males weighing up to 660 pounds and possessing a bite force of over 1,000 pounds per square inch. Their canine teeth can grow up to 3 inches long, perfectly designed for puncturing the thick hide of large prey, while their retractable claws can extend up to 4 inches and are sharp enough to tear through muscle and bone with ease. Despite their beauty and apparent calm in captivity, tigers retain all the instincts of apex predators. Stephanie suggested working in the secondary area that day, referring to the space where food was prepared, separated from Raja's primary habitat by reinforced barriers. She proposed filming educational content about feeding protocols and tiger nutrition, emphasizing that it wouldn't be different from what they had done before. David hesitated. The secondary area was technically safe. It had been designed for exactly this kind of educational work, with multiple barriers between humans and the tiger. Stephanie had worked in that space before without incident, and her educational content had genuinely helped people understand the complexities of tiger care and conservation. Against his better judgment, influenced by Stephanie's track record and genuine expertise, David agreed to allow her into the secondary enclosure area. It was a decision based on trust built over months of successful collaboration, but it failed to account for the subtle changes in Raja's behavior. Stephanie entered the secondary area with her camera equipment, genuinely excited about creating content that would help people understand the daily realities of caring for a tiger in captivity. Raja watched her movements with what appeared to be his usual calm interest, showing no obvious signs of agitation. She began explaining to her camera about the meal preparation area, describing how much planning went into feeding a tiger properly, and educating viewers about the complexities involved in proper tiger nutrition and care. Raja's amber eyes tracked her movements with the calculated gaze that marked him as an apex predator. Tigers are solitary animals with an acute sense of territory, and subtle changes in their environment or routine can trigger responses that even experienced handlers don't always anticipate. The fatal moment came when Stephanie, focused on her educational presentation, moved closer to the primary barrier than she had ever done before. She wasn't being reckless. She was simply trying to get a better camera angle to show the feeding setup. But to Raja, her proximity to his primary territory during his afternoon rest period triggered instincts that have been suppressed but never eliminated by years in captivity. The tiger's response was instantaneous. His massive paw struck through the barrier with lightning speed, his claws extending to their full length as he grabbed Stephanie's arm. The attack triggered every alarm system in the facility as David activated emergency protocols. But Raja's size and power made immediate intervention extremely difficult. By the time they managed to secure Raja and reach Stephanie, she had sustained injuries that proved fatal, despite immediate medical attention and rapid transport to a trauma center. The attack lasted less than 3 minutes, but it demonstrated the awesome power of an apex predator whose wild instincts remained unchanged despite years of careful handling. Stephanie's death became the catalyst for the most comprehensive federal investigation of exotic animal facilities in U.S. history. David faced federal charges for operating without proper permits and was sentenced to 2 years in prison. The facility was permanently closed, and all animals were relocated to accredited sanctuaries. It was September 3rd, 2017, at a safari park outside Paris, France. The late summer sun made long shadows across the grassy areas, and cars moved slowly along the road they were supposed to follow. The park was designed to make visitors feel like they were in the wild, with predators walking around in wide spaces. The animals were separated from people only by fences and strict rules. Families came from across Europe to see lions, tigers, and other animals in settings that looked more natural than traditional zoos. That afternoon, the rules would be tested with deadly results. Rose Dubois was 43 years old and lived in Lyon. She worked as an insurance clerk at a mid-sized company, where she processed claims and took customer phone calls. Her coworkers said she did not like doing the same tasks every day and would get restless when work became routine. Friends knew her as someone who enjoyed trying new things and often looked for different activities on weekends to make her life more interesting. On this trip, she wanted to see something that wasn't part of her normal life in the city. She thought the safari park would let her get close to the animals. Staying inside a car felt limiting to her, and she said it made the experience feel too far away. The warning signs and the things staff members told visitors seemed like too much to her. She thought they were meant for people who might do dangerous things. She believed that if she was careful, getting out of the car for a short time would give her a better view without putting herself at risk. The park was large, covering several hundred acres with big enclosures that went across rolling fields. Tall grass moved in the breeze, broken up by groups of trees and shaded areas where animals rested during the hottest part of the day. The road went through the reserve, winding past enclosures for plant-eating animals like zebras and antelopes before reaching the predator section. Here, visitors drove through metal gates into restricted areas where signs were posted every few hundred feet. Tigers walked around behind fences that looked far away, but everyone knew the animals could close the gap in seconds if they had the chance. From inside the vehicle, the experience felt safe and controlled. Tigers are powerful runners and can cover ground quickly in short bursts, reaching speeds of up to 35 miles per hour. Unlike lions, which often hunt in groups, tigers work alone and prefer surprise attacks. They like to strike from hiding when prey is close enough and unaware of danger. At safari parks around the world, staff stress that visitors should never leave their vehicles, because even a brief mistake can cause an attack. That day, staff reminded visitors many times to stay inside their cars. Guides at the entrance gate gave clear warnings before cars entered the tiger section. Additional staff members were stationed at points along the route to watch for problems. Despite these reminders, Rose was restless as their car moved through the area. Witnesses later said she grew impatient and complained that her phone couldn't get a clear enough view from inside the vehicle. The windows were tinted, and she said the glass was making her photos look unclear. As their vehicle slowed near a group of trees where several tigers were resting, she opened the door and stepped out with her phone raised, determined to get the shot she wanted. Other visitors saw her almost right away. Some honked their horns, others shouted through open windows, trying to warn her to get back inside. Park staff who were monitoring the area began moving toward her location, but they were too far away to reach her quickly. The grass near the tree line moved before she could react. A tiger had been lying in the shade, almost invisible against the dry grass and fallen leaves. In seconds, it jumped forward. Witnesses described the blur of orange and black moving across the ground, covering the distance with frightening speed. Rose turned as the animal hit her, knocking her onto the dirt road. The tiger closed its jaws around her shoulder as she screamed, dragging her across the ground. Dust rose in clouds as its claws dug into her body. People inside nearby cars shouted, and some reached for their own cameras, recording parts of the attack as it happened. Her phone fell from her hand, sliding across the dirt before stopping near the vehicle she had just left. The tiger pulled her toward the grass, stopping only to adjust its grip. Rose struggled as the tiger dragged her, but the deep bite to her shoulder had already cut major blood vessels. She was losing strength very fast, her movement slowing as blood poured onto the dirt road. She stopped moving less than a minute after the first strike. When staff forced the animal back with vehicles and warning shots, Rose was motionless on the ground. She died within minutes from blood loss and injuries to her upper body. The safari road fell quiet, except for distant engines and the sound of people talking about the incident inside their cars. It was September 14, 2018, at a roadside wildlife collection outside Pueblo, Colorado. Rain had been falling through the afternoon, leaving puddles along the gravel paths and wet streaks down the old painted signs that advertised up-close encounters with exotic animals. The storm had passed by evening, but dark clouds still hung over the eastern plains. From the highway, the place looked quiet, but behind the gates, cages of predators lined the walkways. The facility had operated for more than 5 years, drawing visitors who wanted to see big cats without traveling to major zoos. For years, neighbors had questioned whether the facility was safe, complaining about the rusted fencing, the unpleasant smell that lingered after storms, and the sounds of animals at night. Local residents had called county offices multiple times about strange noises and concerns about escaped animals. That Sunday, those concerns would prove justified. Angela Davis was 55 years old and lived in Denver. She had retired early after years of working in property management, where she had overseen apartment buildings across the city. Co-workers remembered her as someone who spoke her mind and did not avoid difficult conversations with problem tenants. That weekend, she was driving south to visit family members in Trinidad for a birthday celebration. The drive usually took about 3 hours, and she had left Denver in the early afternoon. On the way, she noticed the roadside collection and decided to stop. She hadn't planned the visit, but told herself it would be a quick detour before getting back on the road. Friends later said she often made sudden choices like that, drawn to anything that looked unusual or different from her normal routine. The facility was small and weathered, covering about 3 acres of mostly flat land. Chain link cages stood on bare, muddy ground, with some parts reinforced by extra metal bars and others bent or rusted from years of weather exposure. The recent rain had made the path slick, and water collected in low spots near the enclosures. A few other visitors walked slowly between the cages, most of them families with children who pointed at the animals and took pictures. Inside one of the larger cages, two leopards paced restlessly, moving back and forth along the fence line, occasionally stopping to look at the people gathered outside. Visitors stood along the outer rail, pointing quietly while staff members reminded everyone to keep back from the barriers. Leopards are solitary animals, unpredictable in their behavior and capable of leaping more than 20 feet in a single bound. Their bite force can exceed 300 pounds per square inch, strong enough to break the neck bones of large prey animals. Even in captivity, their hunting instincts remain sharp, and they can react quickly to movement or sounds that trigger their predatory responses. The facility employed only 3 staff members that day, fewer than the recommended number for safe operation. Warning signs were posted at regular intervals, but many were faded or damaged by the weather. The barriers consisted of a single chain-link fence with a waist-high rail placed about 3 feet from the cage. This design allowed visitors to get close enough for photos, but provided limited protection if someone reached through the fencing. That afternoon, staff repeated the rules to each group of visitors. Do not lean over the rail, do not touch the fences, and do not reach through the chain link under any circumstances. The warnings were printed on laminated signs and spoken aloud by workers who moved between the enclosures. But Angela, curious and unbothered by the warnings, stepped closer to the leopard cage than the other visitors. She wanted to get a better look at the animals. Witnesses said she leaned against the wet rail and reached her hand through the fence as one of the leopards came near. The animal reacted instantly to her movement, lunging forward and seizing her arms with its jaws. In an instant, the animal lunged forward with the speed and power that made leopards successful hunters. Its jaws locked around her arm just above the wrist and yanked her hard against the cage. The force of the pull slammed her body against the chain-link fence. Screams cut across the path as other visitors realized what was happening. The leopard shook its head violently, a motion that predators use to break the necks of prey animals. Blood began streaming down the metal bars of the cage. Staff members ran toward the enclosure and managed to drive the leopard back with long poles after several strikes against the fence. The animal released its grip and moved to the back of the cage, but the damage was already done. Angela collapsed immediately, her arm torn beyond repair. Witnesses described her body shaking briefly before she went still, blood pooling fast across the wet gravel. The staff tried to help by pressing on the wound with their jackets, but the bleeding was too severe. The injuries had cut through major arteries and veins, causing blood loss that could not be stopped without immediate surgery. She lost consciousness within 3 minutes of the attack due to massive blood loss. Severe arterial damage to her forearm and shoulder caused her heart to stop. Colorado officials launched an immediate review of the facility. Inspectors cited the collection for inadequate barriers and failure to maintain proper visitor distance. The enclosure remained closed, and new regulations were drafted requiring reinforced fencing and wider setback zones for predators.
The morning of June 15, 2013 dawned with perfect conditions across the South African savanna. Golden sunlight filtered through scattered acacia trees, painting the landscape in warm amber hues as a gentle breeze carried the earthy scent of the African bush. The temperature was a comfortable 75 degrees, with clear skies stretching endlessly over the vast wilderness. For most visitors to the private safari reserve, this would be a day of wonder and discovery, filled with breathtaking wildlife encounters and memories to last a lifetime. But for Karen Whitfield, a 52-year-old retail manager from Phoenix, it would become her final day on Earth. Karen embodied everything wrong with entitled tourism. a demanding retail manager who treated every situation like a customer service complaint. She had zero respect for local guides and treated them like servants she could boss around. Her husband watched helplessly as she berated their guide Thabo about everything from the accommodations to the food, constantly reminding everyone about her expensive safari package, as if it gave her ownership of the African wilderness itself. She complained about the early morning wake-up calls, criticized the quality of the binoculars provided, and demanded special treatment at every turn. Other guests at the lodge had already begun avoiding her after just 2 days, tired of her constant negativity and entitled behavior. Thabo, an experienced guide with 15 years of leading safaris, had dealt with difficult tourists before, but Karen's behavior was particularly grating. She questioned his knowledge of animal behavior, demanded he drive closer to dangerous animals for better photos, and treated him like a chauffeur rather than a skilled professional. She had already complained to the lodge management twice about his service, threatening to leave negative reviews online if her demands weren't met immediately. At 4:20 p.m. during the golden hour game drive when animals are most active, Karen spotted a magnificent male lion resting 100 yards away under the shade of a massive baobab tree. The lion was part of a pride that included 3 lionesses and several cubs, all visible in the distance. When Guide Thabo explained they needed to maintain distance for safety, following strict park regulations designed to protect both visitors and wildlife, Karen's entitled rage exploded. She screamed about her expensive safari package and demanded closer access, grabbing the radio in an attempt to contact management. When Thabo tried to explain lion behavior and the very real dangers of approaching too closely, she dismissed his expertise with the same condescending attitude she used on difficult customers. African lions are apex predators with jaws capable of exerting up to 1,000 pounds of pressure per square inch, enough to crush bones with ease. Male lions, weighing up to 420 pounds, are fiercely territorial and will attack anything they perceive as a threat to their pride or domain. Their roar can be heard from 5 miles away, serving as both a territorial marker and a way to communicate with pride members across vast distances. But when they attack, they move with deadly silence and explosive speed, capable of covering short distances at up to 50 miles per hour. Their retractable claws, up to 1.5 inches long, are designed for gripping prey, while their powerful hindquarters provide the strength needed to bring down animals much larger than themselves. Karen opened the vehicle door and stepped out, declaring her intention to get her money's worth from the expensive safari experience. Her husband grabbed desperately at her arm, pleading with her to get back in the vehicle. But she shook him off with the same dismissive attitude she used on anyone who challenged her authority. The 400-pound male lion, already agitated by the vehicle's presence and the loud voices, perceived her aggressive approach as a territorial challenge. Lions are hardwired to respond to threats with immediate violence, especially when protecting their pride. The attack was swift and decisive, a blur of tawny muscle and razor-sharp claws that covered the distance between them in mere seconds. Karen's husband screamed from the vehicle as the lion brought her down just yards from where she'd stood, her entitled demands replaced by brief, terrible sounds that echoed across the savannah before being abruptly silenced. The lion remained with his kill, preventing any immediate rescue attempts, his powerful jaws having delivered a fatal bite to her neck within moments of the attack. Other vehicles in the area immediately radioed for help, but the lion's protective instincts kept him near the body, growling menacingly at any approach. Rangers arrived 45 minutes later with tranquilizer equipment, but Karen had died from massive trauma within minutes of the attack, her body bearing the unmistakable marks of the king of beasts. But while the African savanna claimed one entitled life in its unforgiving embrace, another Karen was about to discover that even in the supposed safety of her own backyard, apex predators don't respect property lines or pool party invitations, and some guests arrive uninvited with deadly intentions. August 3, 2014 brought sweltering heat to Coral Springs, Florida, with temperatures soaring into the mid-90s and humidity thick enough to cut with a knife. The oppressive weather was perfect for pool parties, and Brenda Patterson, a 45-year-old real estate agent from Tampa, was in her element. Her canal front home buzzed with preparation for her annual summer pool party, complete with floating decorations, a fully stocked bar, and catered appetizers. The sun blazed overhead as she made final adjustments to the party setup. But Brenda had no idea she was about to host a guest that would turn her celebration into a nightmare of prehistoric proportions. Brenda was the epitome of high-maintenance entitlement, known throughout her upscale neighborhood for her demanding personality and belief that money could solve any problem. A successful real estate agent who loved hosting elaborate pool parties, she was known for her belief that rules didn't apply to her. She regularly ignored wildlife warnings and HOA regulations, particularly about feeding the alligators that lived in the canal behind her property. To Brenda, these prehistoric predators were just another amenity to enhance her guests' experience, like floating pool lights or a well-stocked bar. She had been warned multiple times by wildlife officers about the dangers of feeding alligators, but she dismissed their concerns as government overreach. Her neighbors had complained repeatedly about her reckless behavior, watching in horror as she tossed chicken scraps and leftover food into the canal after each party. She would dismiss anyone who expressed concern, completely ignoring the fact that alligators were responsible for numerous attacks in Florida each year. Her homeowners association had fined her twice for wildlife violations, but she simply paid the fines and continued her dangerous practices, viewing them as a cost of doing business. At 8:45 p.m., with 20 guests enjoying her party and the sun beginning to set over the canal, a 12-foot alligator emerged from the water onto her pool deck, an area where she'd been throwing chicken scraps for months. The massive reptile, weighing nearly 500 pounds, moved with surprising grace despite its bulk, its prehistoric eyes scanning the crowd of panicking party guests. When guests panicked and started screaming, running toward the house and away from the pool area, Brenda marched toward the massive reptile with a pool skimmer, shouting at it to leave her property. She began hitting the water near the alligator, demanding it leave her party like she was ejecting an unruly guest who had overstayed their welcome. American alligators are living fossils that first appeared 37 million years ago, surviving the extinction event that killed the dinosaurs through their incredible adaptability and predatory efficiency. Their bite force reaches 2,125 pounds per square inch in large males, strong enough to crush a turtle shell or snap a human bone like a twig. When threatened or defending territory, they can lunge forward at speeds up to 25 miles per hour on land, despite their seemingly sluggish appearance. Their powerful tails, making up nearly half their body length, serve as both propulsion in water and devastating weapons on land. The alligator, conditioned to associate humans with food after months of Brenda's illegal feeding and now being threatened with aggressive behavior, perceived her actions as a challenge to its territory. Alligators are opportunistic predators that will attack anything they perceive as prey or threat, and Brenda's aggressive approach triggered its predatory instincts. The massive reptile lunged forward with explosive speed that belied its prehistoric appearance, its powerful legs propelling its bulk across the deck faster than Brenda could react. Brenda tried to run but slipped on the wet deck, her designer heels betraying her in the moment she needed them most. The alligator's massive jaws, lined with 80 razor-sharp teeth designed for gripping and tearing, clamped down with bone-crushing force around her torso. The impact alone was devastating, but the alligator immediately began pulling her toward the water's edge, where it could perform its signature death roll. Guests called 911 from inside the house, but Brenda died from catastrophic injuries within minutes, her pool party ending in a nightmare that would haunt her guests forever and serve as a grim reminder of why wildlife feeding laws exist. May 18th, 2016 brought crisp mountain air and crystal clear skies to Glacier National Park, Montana. Fresh snow capped the distant peaks, while wildflowers dotted the lower meadows in brilliant splashes of purple, yellow, and red. The temperature was a perfect 68 degrees, with a gentle breeze carrying the scent of pine and wildflowers across the alpine landscape. The Highline Trail stretched ahead like a ribbon through paradise, offering breathtaking views that drew hikers from around the world to experience one of America's most spectacular wilderness areas. For Susan Hartwell, a 48-year-old corporate HR director from Denver, it should have been a perfect day for hiking with her book club. Instead, it would become the day she learned that nature doesn't respond to corporate authority or performance reviews. Susan was an overbearing HR director who micromanaged everything and everyone around her, treating every situation like a corporate meeting that needed her immediate supervision and control. She was hiking with her book club, constantly criticizing the trail conditions, other hikers, and park management like she was conducting a performance review of the entire National Park Service. Despite having no wilderness experience beyond occasional walks in city parks, she acted like an expert on everything from trail maintenance to wildlife management, treating the national park like her personal corporate campus, where her word was law and everyone else was an incompetent employee. Her book club members had grown increasingly frustrated with her behavior over the 3-day hiking trip. She had complained about everything from the quality of the trail markers to the appearance of the park rangers, demanding to speak with supervisors at every visitor center they encountered. She criticized other hikers for their pace, their equipment choices, and their photography techniques, offering unsolicited advice with the same condescending tone she used in corporate meetings. Several members of her group had already discussed cutting the trip short just to escape her constant negativity and need to control every aspect of their wilderness experience. At 2:15 p.m., while hiking the Highline Trail with spectacular views of the Continental Divide spread out before them, Susan's group encountered a female grizzly with 2 cubs foraging 75 yards ahead in a meadow filled with glacier lilies. The bears were engaged in natural feeding behavior, completely unaware of the human presence until the hiking group came into view. Guide instructions were crystal clear. Back away slowly, make noise to alert the bear of their presence, and give the animals plenty of space to retreat. Instead, Susan pushed past her terrified group, pulling out her phone and declaring her intention to photograph the bears, citing the park entrance fee she had paid. When the 350-pound sow stood on her hind legs in a defensive display, trying to get a better view of the potential threat, Susan actually stepped closer, shouting at the bear to cooperate with her photography session. Grizzly bears are among North America's most formidable predators, with adult females weighing up to 400 pounds and males reaching 600 pounds of pure muscle and bone-crushing power. Their claws grow up to 4 inches long and are designed for digging roots and tearing apart logs in search of insects, but they're equally effective at tearing apart anything they perceive as a threat. When protecting cubs, a mother grizzly becomes one of the most dangerous animals on the continent, capable of charging at 35 miles per hour and delivering swipes powerful enough to break a human's spine with a single blow. Mother bears with cubs are responsible for the majority of fatal bear attacks, as their protective instincts override any natural fear of humans. The protective mother grizzly, seeing Susan's aggressive approach toward her cubs, interpreted the behavior as a direct threat to her offspring. Bears communicate through body language, and Susan's forward movement and loud vocalizations were the exact opposite of what the bear needed to see to feel safe. The massive sow dropped to all fours and charged at 35 miles per hour, covering the distance between them in seconds with the unstoppable force of a freight train. Susan attempted to assert her authority even as the massive bear knocked her down with a single powerful swipe that shattered multiple ribs and punctured her lung. The attack was brief but devastating. The bear delivered several crushing blows with her massive paws before retreating with her cubs, having neutralized what she perceived as a threat to her offspring. Susan's injuries were immediately fatal, her corporate authority meaningless against 400,000 years of maternal instinct and evolutionary programming. Her book club members, following proper protocol, had backed away to a safe distance and survived to tell the tale, though they would be forever traumatized by witnessing nature's brutal efficiency. Rangers arrived within an hour to find Susan's body, a grim reminder that nature's hierarchy doesn't recognize human management structures or corporate titles. September 7, 2017, brought perfect dawn conditions to Año Nuevo State Park, California. The Pacific Ocean stretched endlessly toward the horizon, its surface painted in shades of gold and crimson as the sun crested the coastal mountains in a spectacular display of natural beauty. Light offshore winds created glassy conditions with minimal waves, and the water temperature was a comfortable 64 degrees, ideal for swimming if one ignored the prominent warning signs posted throughout the area. The morning air was crisp and clean, filled with the salt scent of the ocean and the distant barking of elephant seals. For Jennifer Caldwell, a 41-year-old marketing executive from Los Angeles, It seemed like the perfect opportunity to maintain her fitness routine during her wellness retreat. She had no idea she was about to enter a hunting ground, where she would become the prey in an ancient dance of predator and victim. Jennifer embodied the worst of entitled Los Angeles culture, bringing her demanding personality and superiority complex to every situation she encountered. A successful marketing executive on a wellness retreat that she had already criticized extensively on social media, she complained about everything from the accommodations to the organic food, the meditation sessions to the yoga instructors. She was an aggressive swimmer who ignored all posted warnings and lifeguard instructions, believing her superior swimming skills and decades of pool experience made safety rules irrelevant. To Jennifer, the ocean was just another amenity that should bend to her will, like a hotel pool or private gym, rather than a wild ecosystem filled with apex predators that had ruled these waters for millions of years. Her fellow retreat participants had grown tired of her constant complaints and entitled behavior over the past week. She had demanded special meal accommodations, criticized the retreat leader's qualifications, and posted negative reviews online while still participating in the program. She treated the local staff like servants and dismissed safety briefings as fear-mongering designed to limit her experience. Several participants had requested room changes to avoid her negativity, and the retreat organizers were considering asking her to leave early. At 7:30 a.m., despite multiple posted warnings about great white sharks and seal activity, Jennifer entered the water at Año Nuevo Beach for her daily constitutional swim. The warnings were particularly urgent during this time of year, as September marked peak seal pupping season when great whites were most active in the area. Local surfers who were checking the conditions immediately warned her about a 14-foot great white spotted just 30 minutes earlier during the early morning seal hunting period. But Jennifer dismissed their concerns with typical arrogance, claiming decades of swimming experience made their warnings irrelevant. She swam directly toward the elephant seal colony, declaring the warnings were probably fabricated to keep tourists away, and that she refused to let local propaganda interfere with her workout routine. The seals, sensing danger, began barking more frantically and moving toward the water, but Jennifer interpreted their behavior as simply being startled by her presence, rather than fleeing from a much more dangerous predator lurking beneath the surface. Great white sharks are apex predators virtually unchanged for 400 million years of evolution, representing the pinnacle of oceanic hunting efficiency. They can detect electrical impulses from a beating heart and sense vibrations in the water from great distances, making them incredibly effective at locating prey even in murky conditions. Their 300 serrated teeth, arranged in multiple rows, continuously regenerate throughout their lifetime, ensuring they always have razor-sharp weapons ready for hunting. When attacking from below, they can launch their 2,000-pound bodies partially out of the water at speeds reaching 25 miles per hour, delivering a bite force of up to 4,000 pounds per square inch. Their torpedo-shaped bodies are perfectly designed for explosive bursts of speed, and their dark upper coloration provides perfect camouflage when viewed from above. The massive great white, a 16-foot female that had been patrolling the seal colony's feeding grounds since before dawn, detected Jennifer's movements from nearly a quarter-mile away. The shark's sophisticated sensory system identified the unusual splashing patterns and electrical signatures that didn't match the seals it typically hunted in these waters. As Jennifer swam closer to the seal colony, completely oblivious to the danger beneath her, the great white began its approach from the depths, rising silently through the dark water with predatory precision, honed by millions of years of evolution. The attack came without warning, as great white attacks always do. The massive shark struck Jennifer from below in a classic predatory attack, its enormous jaws clamping down with devastating force around her torso. The impact alone was enough to cause fatal injuries, but the shark's serrated teeth tore through flesh and bone with surgical precision. Her screams alerted surfers who immediately called 911, but the shark's initial bite had caused catastrophic blood loss and internal trauma that made survival impossible. Coast Guard helicopters arrived within 30 minutes, their crews scanning the crimson-stained water for any sign of life. But Jennifer had already succumbed to her injuries, her decades of swimming experience useless against millions of years of predatory evolution. The great white, having determined that Jennifer was not its preferred prey, had released her and disappeared back into the depths, leaving behind only the tragic evidence of what happens when human arrogance meets nature's most perfect predator. March 12, 2018, brought mild spring weather to the private primate sanctuary in North Carolina, with temperatures reaching a comfortable 72 degrees and gentle breezes carrying the scent of blooming dogwood trees across the facility's grounds. The sun filtered through the canopy of oak and pine trees that surrounded the sanctuary, creating dappled patterns of light and shadow on the walking paths. Dogwood trees were beginning to bloom, their white petals drifting like snow across the facility's grounds in a peaceful display that masked the tension building within the sanctuary's walls. For Michelle Brennan, a 39-year-old nonprofit administrator from Atlanta, it seemed like the perfect day to create content for her social media followers. She was about to make a decision that would cost her everything and serve as a brutal reminder that some boundaries should never be crossed. Michelle was a controlling nonprofit administrator who volunteered at the primate sanctuary primarily to network and boost her social media presence, rather than out of any genuine concern for animal welfare. She constantly criticized the facility's operations and treated the experienced staff like incompetent subordinates, despite having zero animal experience herself and only volunteering for 3 months. To Michelle, the sanctuary was just another photo opportunity, and the dangerous primates were props for her Instagram feed rather than powerful wild animals deserving respect and caution. She had already posted dozens of photos and videos from the sanctuary, always positioning herself as the expert, despite her complete lack of qualifications. Her behavior had become increasingly problematic over the weeks leading up to the incident. She questioned safety protocols, criticized feeding schedules, and constantly suggested improvements that demonstrated her fundamental misunderstanding of primate behavior and sanctuary operations. Staff members had complained to management about her entitled attitude and disregard for safety rules, but she was a significant donor to the organization, which complicated efforts to address her behavior. She had been caught multiple times in restricted areas, always claiming she was just trying to help or getting better photos for fundraising. At 11:40 a.m., while staff conducted a mandatory safety meeting about new protocols for handling aggressive primates, Michelle used her volunteer key card to enter the restricted area housing Bruno, a 180-pound rescued male chimpanzee with a history of aggressive behavior toward humans. She had been complaining about boring volunteer duties like cleaning enclosures and preparing food, wanting instead to create exciting content that would generate more likes and followers on her social media accounts. Bruno had been rescued from an illegal breeding operation and had never properly socialized with humans, making him particularly dangerous and unpredictable. When she entered Bruno's enclosure with her phone held high, filming herself for what she planned to be a dramatic video about connecting with their primate cousins, the territorial male chimp initially displayed warning behaviors that any trained staff member would have immediately recognized as signs of extreme agitation. Bruno screamed, bared his teeth, and charged the fence, all clear indicators that he felt threatened and was preparing to defend his territory. Michelle, filming herself with her back to the agitated animal, dismissed his behavior as attention-seeking while she approached closer, attempting to take a selfie with the increasingly agitated primate. Chimpanzees possess nearly twice the muscle strength of humans, with muscle fibers that contract with explosive power developed through millions of years of evolution in the African forests. Their canine teeth grow up to 1.3 inches long, designed for tearing flesh and establishing dominance within their social groups, while their hands can grip with tremendous force and tear apart objects that would require tools for humans to damage. When threatened in their territory, male chimps become incredibly aggressive, using their superior strength and agility to neutralize perceived threats with brutal efficiency. Unlike humans, they fight without restraint or mercy, using their teeth and powerful hands as weapons in a display of primal violence that can be shocking in its intensity and speed. Bruno, feeling threatened in his territory by Michelle's aggressive approach and loud vocalizations, launched himself at the enclosure barrier with the explosive power that made chimpanzees so dangerous in captivity. His 180-pound frame, packed with muscle and driven by territorial rage, struck the barrier with enough force to rattle the entire structure. Michelle, finally realizing the danger she had placed herself in, tried to back away, but she had already triggered the chimp's attack response, and there was no retreat from the consequences of her reckless behavior. The powerful chimp, using his incredible upper body strength, managed to grab Michelle through the barrier, his long arms reaching farther than she had anticipated. His grip was like a steel vise, and once he had hold of her, there was no escape from his crushing strength. Michelle's screams alerted staff who initiated emergency protocols, but the powerful chimp had already begun inflicting severe injuries with his teeth and hands, his primal instincts taking over completely. Her phone clattered to the ground, still recording as Bruno demonstrated why these animals require maximum security enclosures and why safety protocols exist. Staff managed to tranquilize Bruno within minutes of hearing Michelle's screams, but the brief encounter had been devastatingly effective. Michelle had sustained fatal injuries from the brief but violent encounter, her quest for social media fame ending in a tragedy that would haunt the sanctuary forever and serve as a stark reminder of the thin line between human civilization and the raw power of our evolutionary cousins. The incident led to a complete overhaul of volunteer access protocols and mandatory animal behavior training for all sanctuary workers, ensuring that Michelle's death would serve as a final lesson about respecting the wild nature that can never truly be tamed, no matter how long it has been in captivity. As the sun set over the sanctuary grounds, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Michelle's story joined the grim collection of encounters that remind us that nature's power remains unchanged by human arrogance, and that some lessons are written in blood by teachers who show no mercy to those who refuse to learn. These 5 women, each convinced of their own superiority over the natural world, discovered too late that apex predators don't recognize human hierarchies, social media followers, or credit card receipts. They only understand the ancient language of survival, where entitlement means nothing, and respect for nature's power is the only currency that matters. Thanks for watching. Want to watch more? Click on your screen now